Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Amber Valley series. There are 35 parishes in this beautiful slice of eastern Derbyshire. Here's one for your viewing pleasure. Hello folks, welcome back to Amber Valley again. It's sunrise, it's almost sunrise, you can tell by the sky. I learnt last night in the hotel that this hour before sunrise is called blue hour. And I think it's right, because if you look at the sky, it's a definite shade of blue, isn't it? It's actually quite pretty. So the sun is going to rise over this place as we walk around it. We're beginning outside a church in a place called Birchwood in the parish of Somercotes. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Somercotes, Summer Cottages. This week in Amber Valley we're in another mining area, and yes, hearing that, you might think it's getting a bit repetitious in this part of the world. Well, what can I say? The coal reserves in Derbyshire were big. This is Somercotes, which was once surrounded by no less than 5 pits. Unlike its neighbours, which don't show many signs of the industrial past they had, Somercotes most definitely does. It's full of them. From the mineworkers' houses to the community buildings, this place shows all the classic signs of being a former mining village. Most of it was built after the mines were established, and that's why this one doesn't have a lot of ancient history. Having said that, Somercotes does have some. For a start, its name is a big clue. Summer Cottages is a reference to seasonal grazing, when herdsmen would use temporary huts as literal summertime homes. Furthermore, the original Somercotes village was nowhere near its current centre. Instead, it was located along a thin ribbon-like road towards Pye Bridge. That settlement still exists today, but now it's called Lower Somercotes. The new village began to take shape in the 18th century when a turnpike road was driven north to Alfreton from Nottingham. And these days, it's a big place. Let's dive in and see what we can find. We begin our walk in Birchwood, outside a church which stands tall on top of a hill overlooking some lovely Derbyshire countryside. Even though it may look like one, this is not an Anglican church. Instead, it's the Birchwood Methodist Church, and it was built in 1853. It was designed by none other than John Smedley. You might recall him from the Dethick, Lee and Holloway episode. This handsome building, which houses one bell in its tower, stands within quite an extensive churchyard that adjoins a modern housing estate to the south. Next door, there's a disused schoolroom which could accommodate 200 children at one time. Over the road here, I found some allotments. That'll keep the fans happy for another day. Let's make our way along Birchwood Lane and into Somercotes itself. Birchwood was known for its coal and ironstone deposits. It was an ancient settlement along with the likes of Pennytown and Muckham. During the 20th century, these places all but disappeared, and the area they covered was absorbed into Somercotes. Now, only their names are remembered via modern street signs. Birchwood Lane ends at a busy junction with the B600. A left turn here would take you down Somercotes Hill into the original Somercotes village. We're in the heart of the new village here though, at the Devonshire Arms. This is one of the many pubs in Somercotes, a list that includes both those open and now closed. It's believed the Devonshire Arms was named thanks to the Derbyshire Rifle Volunteer Corps in 1860. Speaking of the military, there's a war memorial bench over the road, close to the village hall. Built in around 1970, Somercotes Village Hall was originally known as the St Thomas's Centre, owing to the fact it was owned by the church. In the 1990s, the hall was falling into disrepair and it was leased to Somercotes Parish Council. For a short time afterwards, it became known as the Parish Hall, as the council set up an office inside the building. That's the ideal time to break out the cards. TVI is on the Somercotes notice board and Amber Valley is down to 7. The house behind it all is the vicarage, built in 1964 on land originally owned by the National Coal Board. Next door we have the church. Dedicated to St Thomas, this was built in 1901. Somercotes, along with all of its surrounding hamlets, was until 1853 part of the parish of Alfreton, and as such, it didn't have its own church. The first religious building here was a small Methodist chapel, and this church stands where that once was. In 1927, this war memorial cross was added in its grounds. St Thomas's walls are built of Coxbench stone, with dressings of red stone from both Coxbench and Chevin quarries. It's a beautiful building all in all. The road this is all on runs directly north into Alfreton. It began life as a turnpike, which ran from Alfreton to Nottingham. It's also the road upon which many of the village's amenities initially grew, like for example, pubs and schools. The standout feature for me along here is the Premier Electric Theatre. This was a cinema and it opened in 1912. To get into it you had to go through the front of a shop. In 1960, a rogue firework gutted its interior. It later became a bingo hall in 1974, but now this grand old building stands abandoned and has done since 2013. It's worth noting that although the old turnpike follows a pretty direct route, centuries ago the original road between Alfreton and Nottingham was very different. It was an extremely windy road which passed through Birchwood before emerging at Lower Somercotes. This area was open and rural and it was known as Somercotes Common. The former Royal Tiger pub, seen here over this mini roundabout, was one of the first buildings ever constructed on Somercotes Common. Let's go left next along the High Street and see where this takes us. Public transport in Somercotes is pretty good. We've just passed by a bus stop that's served by the Nines, the services we last met in Kilburn. If you drive though, you're well looked after here. There are several garages dotted around Somercotes, and I guarantee with all this traffic, they're always busy. A quick look up Sleepmore Lane next brings us to the Salvation Army Hall. They've had a presence in Somercotes since 1894. Originally, they held their services in a corrugated iron building, which was eventually demolished and replaced with this. Mansfield Street next, and here's a snooker club. It doesn't have any tables these days apparently, only 2 pool tables instead. At the end of the road we're faced with Somercotes Infant School. This works in partnership with Summerlee Park Junior School, which is further around our route. This is Victoria Street. Not a single building on this road predates 1890. This, like many streets in Somercotes, was originally a private trackway and later adopted as a public road. Interestingly though, Mansfield Street was never publicly adopted and remains a private road to this day. Now we're coming onto a street which leads to Leebrooks, Somercotes' neighbour. There's a garage along here, as well as the former Horse and Jockey pub. Although not a particularly large property, this had a relatively large club room where meetings and events were often held. Over the road is the Leebrooks Art Complex. It's a gallery and a studio which offers original work created by professional artists. A range of work is displayed on a monthly basis in its main exhibition room. Let's continue on as Somercotes now becomes Leebrooks. Whilst many of the smaller hamlets around Somercotes have been absorbed into it, Leebrooks still maintains its own identity. Only part of Leabrooks falls within Somercotes Parish, a small handful of streets to the north of what's known as Leabrooks Corner. Namely, these are Main Road, Chapel Street, Wood Street, Albert Street, Bridle Road and Cemetery Road. They're mostly residential, and they're not all that exciting if I'm being completely honest. However, there are some important landmarks in this area, and off Albert Street you'll find the biggest of them all. This is Alfreton Leabrooks Cemetery. Covering 4 acres, this was opened in 1895 and contains a Gothic mortuary chapel. It was created by a burial board which numbered 8 members. These people represented the urban district council of Riddings, Somercotes and Swanwick wards. Building the cemetery was a necessity, what with the increase in population thanks to the 5 coal mines and the ironworks that surrounded this area. To this day, it remains the largest cemetery in the parish. Chapel Street is next as we make our way towards another pub. This is the Three Horseshoes. It's difficult to date, but this is the only pub Leabrooks has ever had, and it's still going. It's been a central part of the community here for at least the last century. There used to be an annual trip to Blackpool for its loyal and stable customer base. On the customer theme, the Co-op does alright for itself in this part of Derbyshire. There are 2 of these in close proximity, one here and one in the marketplace. Let's head towards the other one. To do that, we have to head around Leabrooks Corner towards the Peniel Christian Church. Known more commonly as the Leabrooks Christian Centre, this opened in 1935. It was originally a house owned by a man who lived in Bank Street. Main Road also has a Chinese takeaway, Wok In. It used to be called the much more humorous Wok This Way. Just up the street is Owen Taylor's Butchers, which recently celebrated their 100th anniversary. This award-winning family butchers has been serving Leabrooks and Somercotes since 1922. Now I think it's time we got a little sporty. That's where Somercotes Park comes into play. In the early 1900s, Somercotes, Leabrooks and Birchwood were badly in need of a recreation ground. The idea of building one had been mooted for several years, but finally, in 1911, the land on which Somercotes Park stands was purchased. It was originally known as Somercotes Recreation Ground. Its original bowling green still survives, and it's still in regular use. These days, the area includes the massive Summerlee Park Centre, a multi-use games area, an outdoor fitness centre and a skate park. It's still as active as it ever was. Summerlee Park Junior School next. This used to be a secondary school and it was built in 1933. In 1973, a fire caused by an act of arson destroyed half of its buildings. They were never rebuilt and the school merged with Swanwick Hall. At that point, Summerlee Park became the junior school it is today. Now we're on a path which arcs around the back of St Thomas's churchyard. This brings you to the marketplace, although market trading within it stopped many years ago. It's now just a glorified car park with a few shops and businesses around its edge. The marketplace opened in 1896, but it's not known with any great certainty when it ceased. Here now there's a detailed history board telling you all about Somercotes and how it grew with industry. This mentions a raft of key figures who all had a hand in building it all too. Too many to list. The marketplace has this very attractive clock tower, although there was no indication of how or why this was built. The second co-op is on the edge of the marketplace. Less than a century ago, terraced cottages stood where this is today. A massive change. Now we're going to follow Somercotes Hill, downhill thankfully, back towards the start. From this point onwards it's a bit of a mixture. You're heading out of the village centre and so shops and amenities gradually start to diminish as you descend the slope into the valley below. There's the odd business here and there, but mostly it's housing all the way down this hill. We're heading towards what will be the final pub we'll catch on this main walk, the Old English Gentleman, which was ideally placed to catch passing trade. It's hard to know exactly when this one was built, but it's believed to be early 19th century. Originally this one was called Horseshoes, as it once contained a blacksmith's shop, a shoeing shed and a brew house. These would have been seen as vital by travellers along the Alfreton to Nottingham Turnpike. A bit further and you come to Windmill Rise. Opposite this street there's some clear evidence of the Turnpike's former existence, a good old-fashioned cast iron milepost. From this point, Alfreton was 2 miles to the north and Nottingham was 14 to the south. After turning left into Stanley Street, you're then in what's perhaps the most modern part of Somercotes we've seen so far. This is the South Spire estate and it contains loads of streets and houses which look exactly like these on Haston Drive. There's also a brand new addition to this already sizable village being built down here too. Many of the streets on the South Spire estate are named after members of the famous 1975 Everest expedition led by Sir Chris Bonington. They were all built in the mid-1970s to replace what was a slum considered unfit for purpose. So an hour and a half ago we were in what was called Blue Hour. The hour just after sunrise is called Golden Hour, and this is why. Look at this magnificent view across the valley at my endpoint here in Somercotes. Isn't this just amazing? I would love to live in one of these houses up here because you get that view every day. You just love to wake up, look out your bedroom window and see this. Fabulous. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Okay, I'm not quite done with Somercotes just yet because there's a bit of driving I want to do. We're going to head down to the south of the place because there's another sports area to catch, and then we'll be heading towards an industrial estate to the north of the village as well. At Pye Bridge, right on the eastern boundary of Somercotes Parish, is a piece of land with a heck of a history. Originally a clay pipe and brickworks, it was later subject to open cast coal mining, then became a landfill site, before finally being restored as a home for Amber Valley Rugby Club. This whole area around Pye Bridge and Lower Somercotes has quite the industrial past. To the left of shot behind those houses was the location of Ridding's Ironworks and Tramway. It was commonly referred to as Alfreton Works, despite being nowhere near Alfreton. Later to become Stanton and Staveley, the ironworks opened in 1860 and smelting took place at Pye Bridge until 1926. In 1972, many of the buildings were still in use, although stripped of their equipment. Alfreton Works were arguably just as much as a catalyst for the growth of Somercotes as coal mining was. Now let's see where the mines were. This is Coates Park, where a pit of the same name was sunk in 1850 with shafts that ran to a depth of 143 yards. It mined 2 seams, the bottom hard and the main soft, both of which ran under the Outseats estate at Alfreton. In 1947 the colliery was nationalised and the coal board removed the steam engines and boiler house and converted the mine completely to electric power. The maximum tonnage produced at Coates Park was recorded in 1956, but from that point on the output reduced. It finally closed after 113 years in 1963 on economic and geological grounds. Coates Park these days is quite a bit different. Somercotes Retail Park stands on part of the old mine site. This features household names now like Aldi, The Range, B&M and even a McDonald's. Elsewhere on Coates Park there's an NHS supply warehouse that occupies the site of Somercotes Greyhound Stadium. In turn, that was built on an old cricket ground. The mining history is all memorialised by a pit wheel on the road into Alfreton, and that's where we're heading next, where all this mining history will continue next week. Get ready for a long one. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.